Now back over here, movies, and there we go. So you can see that on click happened pretty fast. Let's go back. But if I hold and click and then release, then it takes me over there. So that's what you folks will be doing with a button, but you also need to do these interactions from like a little sticky footer navigation. So you can do that any way you want. You can make your own icons. You can use the plugins, of course, as well. What I do want to also show you, because I'm not sure if we did this, please set yourself up with a grid. Not this grid, a column grid. Okay, make sure you set yourself up with some decent margins. 5, I kind of like to use 6. And again, it'll auto adjust what your gutters will be. If you maybe want them to be smaller, it'll auto, usually if it's a number that's weird, it'll auto adjust. So now here, I'm crazy with my grids. So now what I'll need to do is, let's see if I want one this. My width is 169. So I'm going to go over here. I want my width. 169. I did that the super janky way, but because I like to work on my grid. Granted, now it's not centered. Oh no, it used to be even wider or smaller. Let's see. I go back 107. Sorry, lots of finicky. There we go. 107 is now my new width for my button because I'd like to make sure I'm always working on my grid. Shannon.
Can you make a grid in your assets as well?
Make a grid. And yes, you can. It's long as it won't work. Like you'll need to make sure that your assets page is the same width as this. So those numbers will like work the same. But yeah, you could do that. So with 393. And then you could literally just column grid. What do I have here? 6 column grid, 20 and 15. So yeah, you could do that. So this way you don't need to do the little fiddly around thing if you want. I usually on my assets page, like it's usually massive, but what I have done before is, I'm kind of going off here, is added a section. And then from the sections, you can add a frame. And then your frame could be the size as this, if you want to do it that way. But usually it's usually just one big giant section for all of my assets. Again, if you'll figure it out depending on your project size or your website size, do you need to add a whole other page to put your assets on, or is it easier to have them here because it's not very big and you can just put all your interactions there? Meg.
Sorry I missed the start. I didn't know my in-laws were all home, but
That's okay.
I was going to ask about the ideation sort of portion. Do you tend to go straight to, like you just made your big little sheet there and
Yeah.
colors and make some assets and like, is that your process, or would you pull like an InDesign or a different like Adobe
I've done yes,
Oh.
I've done sometimes I use Adobe, but sometimes for this, like I don't really start any project without a folder of inspiration. So that's one thing. Sometimes I'll do a little mood board in another platform. Sometimes I'll do my mood boards in Figma. Depends how quick or how fast I'm going to be throwing something together. Color palette, I usually build in Figma, especially because you can build your style sheet with colors in Figma. So we'll usually build them out there. And then from there, I start to test different buttons, what's going to work. That's the great thing about having them as your assets, because if you do one and then you're not liking it, but you've already plunked that in like 17 different places, you can literally just go back in there and be like, I actually don't want them to be pill shape. I want them to be squares, and then it'll populate throughout. So yeah, I'll never jumping in like this is super jank for sure. Always starting with like your color palette, or really we would probably start off with like a wireframe, and all of that would be done first. And then from your wireframe, just because it's wireframe, you would still end up defining what shape those buttons are, because that's all going to still be defined in the wireframe stage of things, and what those buttons are going to stay or say, sorry, and then go into the actual full comp.